Prepare for a fascinating journey through time, diving into the depths of biblical mysteries. Sparkles today, we will unravel one of the most enigmatic and at the same time crucial figures in human history, Cain's mysterious wife. Who was she? Where did she come from? And what was her true importance in a time when the world was just beginning? Before we dive in, if you're passionate about stories like this, which reveal the nuances of ancient texts, go ahead and leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our explorations. The Bible, this ancient book that serves as a map for so many, introduces us to Cain, the firstborn of Adam and Eve, as the first murderer in history. But what about the woman who, according to Holy Scriptures, married him and bore him a son named Enoch? It is here that the mystery deepens and questions echo through the millennia, challenging our understanding and our imagination. This woman, who does not even have a name recorded in the canonical pages of the Bible, is one of the most intriguing pieces of the great puzzle of Genesis. She represents a question mark that, however, holds the keys to understanding not only Cain's lineage, but the very continuity of human life after the first and most dramatic events of creation. It is important to emphasize from the outset, the basis of our discussion is the Bible. However, to try to unravel the whys and the whos, many traditions and ancient books, which are not the Bible, but are studied for a deeper understanding, such as the Book of Jubilees, offer us perspectives and names. We will explore all of this, separating what is scripture from what is tradition. The great enigma: where did Cain's wife come from? Imagine the scene, my friends. Eden was lost. Paradise was forever out of reach. Adam and Eve, our first parents, were expelled to a wild and unknown world, carrying the weight of disobedience and the seed of mortality. Humanity at this initial stage was terribly limited. It began with Adam and Eve. Then came their children, Cain and Abel, and then the tragedy. Cain, driven by envy and hatred, took the life of his own brother, Abel. The innocent blood cried out from the earth, and Cain was cursed, sentenced to be a wandering fugitive, cast out from the presence of God and the land he knew. It is in this scenario of deep desolation and exile that the biblical narrative shocks us with a surprising statement. The Bible tells us, directly and unequivocally, in chapter 4, verse 17 of the book of Genesis, Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. But wait a minute. Here the human mind stumbles upon a crucial question. Stop and think with me. If Adam and Eve were the first human beings and Cain and Abel their first children, where exactly did this woman come from whom Cain knew and with whom he had a child? This is a question that echoes in the hearts and minds of theologians, Bible scholars, and the curious for countless generations. How could a new person appear to marry Cain if the world's population consisted only of him, Adam and Eve? The answer, my friends, is not in an explicit verse that names her or details her origin, but it is implicitly in the Holy Scriptures themselves, requiring an understanding of the context of that primordial time. The Bible, in chapter 5, verse 4 of the book of Genesis, gives us a vital clue. After the birth of Cain and Abel, Adam begot sons and daughters. Yes, you heard right, daughters. Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters throughout their long lives. Adam lived 930 years. In a world where the human race was just beginning, and there was literally only one family on earth, the only way for humanity to perpetuate itself, to continue to exist and multiply, was through marriage between siblings or very close relatives. As strange and even disturbing as this may sound to our modern ears, with our social and genetic laws, it was an unavoidable biological necessity for the lineage of Adam and Eve to continue and indeed to prosper. There was no other option. Consanguinity, so forbidden and problematic today, was the inescapable foundation of the first human society. Think about it. If it weren't for this, humanity would have died with Cain, or at most with the death of Adam and Eve and their few children. Therefore, Cain's wife was, in all probability, one of his sisters or possibly a niece. The Bible does not name her because, for the greater purpose of the sacred narrative, her name was not as relevant as the fact that humanity continued its journey, even after such a terrible act of violence. She was living proof that life, in some mysterious and resilient way, always finds a way to move forward. Her presence ensures that the seed of humanity is not lost, an invisible but vital thread in the tapestry of destiny. Cain and Abel, the backdrop of the story of love and tragedy. To truly appreciate the role and presence of Cain's wife,
of the light,
we must first revisit the stage where life unfolded. The dramatic, dark, and foundational story of Cain and Abel. It was a time of absolute beginnings, of humanity's first steps outside the divine protection of Eden. The world was vast, untamed, wild, and, in a way, terribly lonely, inhabited by only one family. Adam and Eve, our first parents, learned the bitter taste of disobedience and the hardship of arduous labor. They had Cain, the farmer, whose life was linked to the land and its fruits, and Abel, the shepherd, whose existence was one of care and vigilance over flock. Both, in an act of faith or duty, offered sacrifices to God. But history reveals the first great distinction. Only Abel's sacrifice was accepted with pleasure. Envy, that corrosive and destructive emotion, and rare jealousy in its most toxic form, took root and fermented in Cain's heart, culminating in the first horrific crime in history, the murder of his own brother, Abel. One brother taking the life of another, the very foundation of the human family stained with blood. God, in his unwavering justice, cursed Cain. He was cast out from the divine presence, marked with a sign, so that no one would kill him, and condemned to be a wandering fugitive on the earth. Imagine for a moment the overwhelming despair, the profound loneliness, the excruciating guilt that weighed on Cain's soul. He, the murderer, banished from the presence of his remaining family and the land he knew, condemned to wander aimlessly. What a gloomy destiny. It is in this context of desolation, exile, and a soul burdened with sin that Cain's wife appears in the narrative. She is not merely a partner. She is a beacon of hope, a symbol of continuity amidst moral ruin. She is living proof that, even in the most adverse circumstances, and after the worst human errors, human life persists and new generations will come. She represents the unwavering persistence of life, the primordial strength of the family, even when all seemed lost and without redemption. Without her, Cain's story would end there, in disgrace and sterility, a dead end. But history shows us that this is not what happened. Life, through her, found a way to move forward. And if you're enjoying unraveling these mysteries, don't forget to share them with your friends. The Book of Jubilees. Filling the gaps of history's silence, the Bible, as we know, is a book of profound mysteries, and its silence on certain figures or events has always aroused an insatiable curiosity in the human soul. It is a characteristic that invites reflection, but also the search for more details, for more clarity. It was to try to fill these gaps, to satisfy this innate thirst for minutiae, that other literary and religious works emerged throughout history, seeking to complement or expand biblical narratives. One of the most fascinating and important of these works, which sheds light on the beginnings of humanity, is the enigmatic Book of Jubilees. It is fundamental to understand that the Book of Jubilees is not the Bible. It is an ancient Jewish apocryphal text, meaning it is not part of the canonical Bible for most modern Christian and Jewish traditions. However, it is a document of invaluable worth for understanding how ancient Jews interpreted, developed, and expanded the narratives of Genesis and Exodus. Think of it as a kind of midrash or an expanded history of early times, offering details that the canonical Bible chose to omit, perhaps because it did not consider them essential to its main message, but which help us to build a richer picture of that era. The Book of Jubilees, which was probably written between the 2nd and 1st centuries BC, is one of the richest and most detailed sources for those seeking to know more about Cain's wife. And the great revelation it offers us is that it not only mentions her, but also assigns her a name. Furthermore, it attempts to detail her family relationship with Adam and Eve and the timeline of events in a much more specific way than the Hebrew Bible does. And what does it reveal to us? A name for this mysterious woman. Awan, the first candidate for Cain's wife in the Book of Jubilees. Always remembering, a book separate from the Bible, but of great historical and interpretive relevance. Cain's wife is given a name that resonates with an ancient aura of mystery and significance. Awan. Yes, Awan. This name, which can be interpreted as something close to iniquity or strength, add a layer of symbolism and even premonition to the figure of this woman, although this might be a later interpretation by the scribes who recorded Jubilees. According to the detailed narrative of Jubilees, Awan was, in fact, one of the daughters of Adam and Eve. She was born after Cain and Abel, but before the birth of Seth, the son who would replace Abel. Awan became Cain's wife, and with him, she had a son, whom they named Enoch, the same name as the first city founded by Cain. The text of Jubilees is quite specific, describing that Cain married her in the fourth Jubilee. A Jubilee was a cycle of 49 years, so we will be talking about the period of 190 to 245 years after creation. She would have conceived Enoch when Cain was approximately 19 years old. This extra-biblical narrative makes a remarkable effort to give a face, an identity, and a place in time to the silent and anonymous figure of the canonical Bible. It reinforces the idea that Cain's wife was, in fact, his sister, born of the same parents, Adam and Eve. This not only resolves the dilemma of where she came from for those who read Jubilees in ancient times, but also provides a more complete genealogy and a sense of order in the beginnings that would otherwise seem chaotic for humanity. Awan, therefore, is not just a name. It is an ancient attempt to humanize and contextualize a biblical figure who is vital to the continuity of the narrative, but whom the Bible chose to keep anonymous. She embodies the undeniable need for continuation of life, the founding of the first families in a newly created world, and the establishment of the first human societies, even under the shadow of a terrible crime and exile. Azra, another tradition, another name, more mystery, but the intrigue and the search for answers don't stop at Awan. Other ancient Jewish traditions, also seeking to fill the gaps left by the biblical narrative, offer another name for Cain's wife. Among these sources is the Sefer HaYasher, the Book of Jasher, a text that, like Jubilees, is not the Bible, but is an apocryphal book whose purpose is to expand and comment on narratives of the book of Genesis and other books. And in this book, Cain's wife is known as Azra. Azra, in this account, is also presented as a daughter of Adam and Eve, born during a period when the original family was still the sole source of offspring. The most notable difference in some of these traditions is that Azra is sometimes also identified as Seth's wife. This creates an interesting complexity, suggesting that perhaps there was more than one daughter of Adam and Eve with similar names, or that the memory of these lineages and their respective wives mingled and merged over time in different traditions. It is a reflection of the fluidity and richness of the oral tradition that preceded many of the written texts. Regardless of the name, be it Awan or Azra, the underlying message that these traditions attempt to convey is the same and crucial for understanding that era. Cain's wife was a direct member of the first human family, born of the same parents, Adam and Eve. She was not a creature of another species, nor a woman mysteriously created from nothing, without connection to original humanity. She was one of the daughters generically mentioned in the book of Genesis, an organic part of the first family. These ancient traditions reveal the profound and unwavering human desire to fill the gaps, to give names, faces, and stories to figures that the Bible, in its conciseness, keeps anonymous. They show us how ancient communities dealt with the same questions we ask today, and how they saw coherence, details, and a sense of completeness in the narratives they considered sacred and foundational to their faith and identity. Cain's wife, with or without a name, is an eloquent testimony to the human need for continuity, the resilience of life, and the interconnectedness of all lives at the dawn of humanity. She is a starting point for reflection on origins and destiny, the lineage of Seth, a contrast, a promise, and the hope of redemption, the story of Cain's wife. And by extension, Cain's gains even more depth and meaning when we contrast it with the emergence and development of the lineage of Seth. After the shocking act of Abel's murder and Cain's subsequent banishment and curse, the void left by the loss of Adam and Eve's first two sons was immense. But God, in his providence, did not abandon humanity to despair. Adam and Eve had another son, Seth. The book of Genesis in chapter 4, verses 25 and 26, tells us, with note of hope, Adam lay with his wife again, and she gave birth to a son and named him Seth, saying, God has granted me another child in place of Abel, since Cain killed him. Seth also had a son, and he named him Enosh. At that time, people began to call on the name of the Lord. Cain's wife, therefore, represents the beginning of a lineage that, in many respects, deviated from God's path, following in her father's footsteps. Cain's descendants, although marked by impressive innovations and cultural advancements, figures like Tubal-Cain, the forger of all cutting instruments of bronze and iron and jubal, the father of all who play the harp and flute, were also deeply characterized by violence, arrogance, and depravity. Lamech himself, a descendant of Cain, boasted of killing a man for wounding him and a young man for striking him, going far beyond the vengeance promised Cain, showing an escalation of violence. This lineage is often associated with the flesh, with material development without the corresponding spiritual connection. In stark contrast, Seth's lineage is seen biblically as a lineage of hope, the holy seed, through which the promise of Redeemer would eventually be fulfilled. It was from Seth that Noah would come, and then Abraham, and through him, the entire nation of Israel, culminating finally in the person of the Messiah, Jesus. The significant observation that at that time people began to call on the name of the Lord, with the generation of Enosh, Seth's son, indicates a return to faith, to seeking God, and to genuine worship, distinguishing it markedly from Cain's lineage. The importance of Cain's wife here is immense and often underestimated. She was a progenitor of one of the two great and distinct branches of pre-Diluvian humanity. Her existence ensured that Cain's descendants flourished for good of innovations and for evil of corruption, and that the contrast between the two lineages, one seeking God, the other moving away from him, was evident. She participated, albeit silently, in the foundation of the first civilization, a civilization that would eventually become so corrupt as to demand divine judgment, but which, in its beginning, was the only world that existed. She is a pivot point, an essential link in the unfolding of human history, as the Bible tells it. The Nephilim have an intriguing and deeply mysterious connection to this story. Now, my dear viewers and eager seekers of knowledge, let us delve into one of the greatest and most debated enigmas of the book of Genesis, a mystery that may have an indirect, but deeply intriguing connection to the lineage of Cain's wife. We are talking about the enigmatic and fierce Nephilim. Earth and daughters were born to them. The sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, "My spirit will not." The book of Genesis, in chapter 6, verses 1 to 4, presents us with this mysterious passage full of questions that still resonate today.
The guardians of
when
the
people
light,
began to increase in number and contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. This passage, so brief yet so laden with meaning, has generated centuries of heated debates and diverse interpretations. Who, after all, were these mysterious sons of God? Who were the daughters of humans who attracted them? And who, indeed, were these enigmatic Nephilim, beings of great stature and fame? One of the oldest and most popular interpretations, especially present in Jewish texts and in part early Christian tradition, as in the writings of Justin Martyr, Tertullian, and others, is that the sons of God were, in fact, fallen angels or celestial/divine beings who descended to earth and married human women, disobeying divine order and corrupting creation. The daughters of humans, in this context, will be the women of that pre-Diluvian era, and it is here that Cain's wife and her descendants may enter the scene of this profound mystery. It may be that the daughters of humans included the female descendants of Cain's lineage, a lineage that, as we have seen, was known for its inclination to evil, to material innovation without a moral foundation, and to a lifestyle that strayed from God. Perhaps these women, due to some particular characteristic, be it beauty, boldness, or a rebellious spirit, were the ones who most attracted the attention of these fallen sons of God. Imagine the scene. Humanity growing exponentially, multiplied without moral restraints, and with it, wickedness spreading like a plague across the face of the earth. The unnatural union between these powerful beings and human women would have generated the Nephilim, beings described as giants, heroes of old, or men of renown, perhaps not only for their physical stature, but also for their strength, their cruelty, or their leadership in an increasingly violent world. These Nephilim would have contributed to the widespread corruption of the earth, a corruption so profound that it led to the flood. This connection to Cain's lineage is not direct and indisputable in the scriptures, but is intriguing and thought-provoking. Cain's wife, by initiating a lineage that distanced itself from God and plunged into violence and materialism, may have been a grandmother, great-grandmother, or great-great-grandmother of women who engaged in the forbidden unions, resulting in a race of beings who, in some way, provoked divine wrath, and precipitated the great judgment of the flood. She, in her fundamental role of progenitor, is at the epicenter of the scenario of mystery, corruption, and moral decline that preceded the destruction of the ancient world. Her anonymous but powerful figure and her descendants cast a long and enigmatic shadow over the events that culminated in God's decision to purify the earth. The silent legacy of Cain's wife throughout recorded history, whether in sacred or secular books, many women have had their names carefully recorded, their actions celebrated, their victories extolled, and their struggles remembered. But what about those whose impact was monumental, with consequences that shaped the future, yet remain in the shadow of anonymity, without a name, without a voice, without a hymn in their memory? Cain's wife is, without a doubt, one of the most prominent of these silent figures. She is one of the women who, by her simple existence and motherhood, silently, yet powerfully, changed the course of human history. Her importance transcends the mere biological function of procreation. She was a co-founder of the first city mentioned in the Bible, Enoch, which Cain built in her honor and that of the son they had. She was a matriarchal lineage that, despite its later reputation for iniquity and violence, was also the birthplace of great human talents and innovations. It was from Cain's descendants that the first city builders emerged, the first musicians Jubal, the father of all who played the harp and flute, and the first metallurgist Tubal Cain, the forger of all cutting instruments of bronze and iron, who transformed metals into tools, weapons, and adornments. These technological and artistic advancements, though often used for evil or ostentation, were crucial and irreversible steps in the development of human civilization, laying the foundations of the world to come. Without Cain's wife, none of this would have happened. There would be no such lineage. There would be no Enoch, the city that marks the beginning of urban social organization. There would be no Jubals or Tubal Cains to initiate the arts and technology. Cain's story would end abruptly in his exile, in sterile solitude, and the biblical narrative of humanity would take a drastically different, perhaps even non-existent, course in its current form. She represents the unwavering resilience of human life, the inherent ability to restart even after the deepest tragedy and the most hateful sin. Her existence reminds us that, even in times of great darkness, violence, and sin, life continues its relentless flow. New families form, new generations are born, and history advances, driven by invisible forces and silent acts. She is a personification of the fact that, in all human history, there are anonymous figures, often women, whose role is, paradoxically, indispensable and of vast consequences. Cain's wife, nameless and voiceless in the canonical scriptures, is a powerful reminder that a woman's legacy can be felt for countless generations, shaping the course of human destiny in unimaginable ways, even if she is never recognized by name in the annals of history. The Bible is a map that unveils truths beyond names and silences, and so, my dear and attentive viewers, we come to the end of our journey through the mysteries and depths of the story of Cain's wife. The Bible, with its richness and eloquent silences, is, in fact, the map that guides us through these ancient stories, which transcend time and space. Even if it doesn't give us a name or intimate details about this enigmatic woman, it provides us with the essential, the undeniable fact that she existed, that she married Cain, and that through her, his lineage continued and prospered for a time. Remember, the fundamental truths come from the Bible. Books like Jubilees and Sefer HaYashar, however fascinating they may be, are resources we use to deepen our understanding and speculation, but they are not the inspired Word of God as the Bible is. The Bible's silence, at times, is as profound and eloquent as its most explicit words. By not naming Cain's wife, perhaps it teaches us a valuable lesson, that more important than who she individually was her intrinsic role in God's larger narrative for humanity. She serves a crucial narrative and theological purpose that unfolds in several layers. The unwavering continuity of humanity. She proves that despite sin, death, and expulsion from Eden, God, in His sovereignty, allowed human life to persist and multiply upon the face of the earth, thus fulfilling the original command given to Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply. Her existence is a testament to the resilience of divine creation, the divergent destiny of lineages. She allows the Bible to explore the two great and distinct pre-Diluvian lineages, that of Cain, marked by material innovation, violence, and a progressive turning away from God, and that of Seth, marked by the search for God, the invocation of his name, and the hope of redemption. She is the link that allows the duality of human choice to be fully developed in the narrative, the sovereignty and patience of God. Even in the twisted and often sinful paths of fallen humanity, God kept his plan in motion, allowing history to unfold toward a greater purpose of redemption. Cain's wife, in her contribution to continuity, is part of this larger plan, showing that God works through all circumstances. Cain's mysterious wife is, therefore, much more than a question mark. She is a vivid reminder that biblical history is vast, profound, and full of layers to be unraveled. She invites us to go beyond the surface, to ponder the implications of the narratives, to understand the context of those primordial eras, and to seek the eternal truths hidden behind explicit words and significant silences. Although we may never know her name with absolute certainty or the most intimate details of her daily life, Cain's wife remains a fundamental figure, a woman who, in a newborn world, unnamed and without the spotlight of fame, carried the weight and hope of the future of one of humanity's first and most influential lineages. Her story, told in the subtext of the scriptures and ancient traditions, is a powerful testament to the complexity of human existence, the persistence of life, and the divine providence that weaves all the threads of destiny. And this, my friends, is a truth that resonates through millennia and continues to fascinate us to this day. If you made it this far, it's because you truly love these stories. Don't forget to subscribe for more, and leave your comments on what you thought.